I'm going to ask some of the questions that have come up in the Q&A now. Steve and Derek, if you're able to unmute yourselves, please do so. Steve, one of the questions is about PPE and how, obviously you have some videos of varying ages that you showed. The question is about how PPE has changed over time. And I'm going to expand on that question a little bit and say, how has that affected behavioral management, or has it?
Well, so his original question was, you know, with the chimps in the old days, we didn't use a lot of PPE, gloves, masks, and eye guards of one sort or another. Chimps, unlike rhesus monkeys, don't have the same biohazards. So it's a little bit easier to work with them in terms of PPE. Obviously, the more we get concerned about COVID and herpes B and all these other things that have gone on over the years, the more PPE we wore. So for us, PPE does not typically interfere into the type of behavioral management that we do. Now, safety definitely impacts what we do in terms of behavioral management. So what we've been doing lately is, rather than feeding the chimps by hand, we've been feeding the chimps with tongs. So when they get their reinforcement, they'll get it through using tongs rather than using fingers. That's a safety issue, not really a PPE issue. The whole issue with PPE revolves around whether you make it more dangerous for yourself to do your work when you're wearing glasses that fog up and you can't see, versus having some sort of face shield or something like that. So as far as PPE goes, yes, they're old videos. All of our rhesus monkey videos always had, and all of our cyno videos that I showed, they always had proper PPE, current PPE.
Contemporary PPE.
Contemporary PPE.
For Jessica, based on your results, would you recommend lab sand for short collecting periods? You mentioned you were collecting every 30 minutes.
So you could do longer periods with the lab sand. I would stay with the animals and collect it as they pee. Again, it just increases the amount of urine that you're able to collect during a session. They typically fall asleep longer than an hour, so you would have to do a pilot to see how your animals do. The other thing I suggest is doing it as early in your light cycle as possible. So we were on a normal lights on at 6 a.m. So we got in there around 7 so that they were still active, since they are nocturnal. If you're trying to do all their sleeping, again, not helpful. But you could certainly do longer periods. You just have to then watch food and water restriction issues if you go longer.
And do you know what the lab sand is made of? Has the sand been chemically analyzed?
I don't remember. The MSDS sheet is easily available from the company, and we have a copy. It's exactly the same as the kit for CAAT. So if you pulled up their MSDS sheet, it's all listed there. I just don't remember it.
For Steve and Derek, do you guys see a decline in willingness to perform trained behaviors when animals fall ill or near the end of life? And what have your experiences been, and how have you handled them? Derek, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what kind of illness. So a lot of pain associated with wound healing, etc. Those animals seem to do fine. They overcome it immediately. If it's something that seems to cause inappetence, you may have to change your tactics a little bit, or lethargy, especially with the pigs. A lot of times you're down to physical contact. So the scratching and the rubbing, there's no motivation for them to get a food reward if they have inappetence.
How about you, Steve?
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with that. So if an animal is not interested in, or not motivated to take the reward that you have to give it for whatever reason, then it's probably not going to behave for you. I will say that we've had animals, I hate to say this, that were pretty sick, and they're still willing to do the work that we ask them to do. And in fact, Eric knows this, but I mean, we have a quality of life program. And the problem that we run into with the quality of life program is that the people who are training the animals tend to think that they're not as sick as the veterinarians do and the other people on the quality of life team, because the animals are still working for them. So anything that affects the animal's motivation, you have to use that. You know, my talk was supposed to be about healthcare, so it helps you care for the animals a little bit better.
And then can you comment on whether you have a formalized plan for every non-human primate, or do you just wait for individual needs of the animal?
Okay, so this is unfortunately going to be kind of a long answer. The way we start out with all of our behavioral management stuff, including the training, is that we want to we want to do behavioral management to a baseline level for all of our animals. The problem that comes up when you try and deal with specific cases is that you oftentimes get so caught up in the case that the rest of the animals don't get anything. You know, we all have limited amount of time and resources to do these types of things. So if you start out with the animal who has a problem and you focus all your training in this instance on them, then you might not be able to get around and train everybody else. And I read the question online, and it also had a little something in it about, you know, how would you start your program? So at the beginning, we have trainers who do the training. But over time, what we try and do is we try and morph those trained behaviors and make them the responsibility of the care people. So cutting to the chase, what we end up with is trainers training new animals and or new behaviors, and the care staff, which is integrated but a tiny bit separate, maintaining those behaviors over the long term. So if we have new animals that we have to shift inside or outside, maybe the trainer starts doing that, but the animal care is really the ones who are responsible for moving them inside or outside. Same for presenting limbs and that kind of stuff.
Great. If there aren't any more questions, we might actually take this time to give everybody a quick bio break, and then continue on at 2:45. Thank you again for our panelists, and we'll reconvene in 15 minutes.